Suzanne, I don't see it yet.
It should be there. I set it up 2 weeks ago. And it did say it was going to live streaming service.
Suzanne, I still don't see it.
Okay.
Tried it from my personal Facebook page as well as through the Royal Foundation, Royal Baptist link.
Well, foundation. Yeah, it should. Oh, it still says connecting. YouTube is connected. Royal Foundation is not right now. It says the Facebook stream is live.
It's still not showing on my side.
Yeah, it is on. Let me try. Let me look at something else. I think it's live on on YouTube though. Let me see.
Do you want me to go ahead and get going since it's showing live on one of the platforms, or?
Actually, I don't see it on. I'm looking at the YouTube page.
Okay.
Okay, and Nova just texted and said that they can hear us, but they can't see us. And they can see us on YouTube.
They can see us on YouTube?
They can see us on YouTube, yes.
Okay. Yes, please go ahead and we'll just be doing it on YouTube because I'm not seeing it.
Okay. All right. I will get us going. Well, for those of us who can hear us and see us, welcome this evening. Apologize for the technical delay, but we are so delighted to have you join with us tonight. And we welcome you on behalf of our pastor, Reverend Dr. Isaac J. Holt Jr., and the chairperson for the Wellness on Wednesday committee here at Royal Baptist Church, Sister Cleo Brown Rowland, and our Wellness on Wednesday team. Some of them you'll be seeing, some of them who will be monitoring the chat platform to make sure we get your questions and so that we can respond to those, and so many more who work behind the scenes and who were instrumental for planning this session tonight and others that we offer throughout the year. And I'm honored to be your moderator for the evening for tonight's discussion. I am Reverend Frank Harris. And I want to offer to you and remind us that our Wellness on Wednesday service program ministry began several years ago with the idea that we could serve the community by bringing practical information to the community through experts in various fields. And so we're so delighted to have as our guests tonight some of the panelists that I'll be introducing in a few minutes. And they will share from their professional perspectives on the topic, aging family members, helping them, or perhaps helping you live their or live your best life. So we're so glad to have these experts in the field. And I want to remind our virtual audience that you can submit your questions through our Q&A chat function that we will be monitoring throughout the discussion. And towards the end of our time tonight, we'll ask our panelists to address whatever questions you have presented. So again, thank you for joining us, and we're so grateful for our panelists and for our attendees, whether you're in the local area. Some of you may be watching from across the state, and I know that maybe even my mother is watching tonight, so I'll be on my best behavior, but she is watching from out of state. And I know that there are others who may be joining us from out of state as well. So we welcome you. And we're glad to be able to share this space, this platform, and of course, this information. Wherever you are, I'm sure that you're joining us because you want some information that will be helpful to you and or the loved ones you care for. So with that thought in mind, I would just ask and invite us to pause as we reflect, as I offer these words of prayer and welcome. God, we welcome your presence on this platform, and we thank you for our guests, and we thank you for our attendees. Thank you that what we will hear tonight will help us be better servants and be better able to care for and care with our loved ones. So thank you for this opportunity to share and be part of this experience tonight. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you again. And again, we're delighted to have our panelists, and it's my honor to introduce them. And first of all, we welcome Dr. Anya Benitez, who is a clinical neuropsychologist and associate professor of neurology at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And her research focuses on understanding the brain as it ages, how it might progress to Alzheimer's disease, and how to treat memory impairment with brain stimulation. She is passionate about early detection of memory impairment and helping older adults and their families thrive in spite of these challenges. So Dr. Benitez, Anya, we welcome you tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Thank you. And we also welcome Dr. Katrina Robinson, who is an associate professor of neurology, again at MUSC, and a research health scientist with the Ralph Johnson VA Medical Center. She co-directs the fundamental discovery pillar within the Center for Healthy Aging, and her research is focused on studying the impact of diet, obesity, and diabetes in overall brain health. Dr. Robinson's laboratory is focused on developing therapies to improve stroke recovery and memory loss associated with dementia. So Dr. Robinson, thank you for joining us, and we welcome you as well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We're also delighted to have with us tonight attorney Audrey Brown, and she is a staff attorney with the Charleston Pro Bono Legal Services in downtown Charleston. The Charleston Pro Bono Legal Services serves the vital legal needs of Charleston's economically disadvantaged by providing free legal services to low-income residents of Charleston County. She has handled a variety of legal matters, focusing primarily on family law, simple estate planning, and the estate probate cases. So wonderful background, wonderful resource of information, and we are delighted to have you with us as well. Attorney Brown, welcome.
Thank you for having me. The mute button didn't want to cooperate.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Thank you. And we are also delighted to have no stranger to the Royal community, one of our members. She is a social worker with the palliative care adult team at the Medical University of South Carolina here in Charleston, in the person of Keisha Graham, who's a native of North Carolina. And Keisha has served over 20 years as a social worker, and she has been involved with many organizations that support patients and caregivers, such as the Alzheimer's Association, the Trident Area Agency on Aging, the Low Country Senior Network, the South Carolina Aging in Place Coalition, South Carolina Hospice and End of Life Coalition, and the Center of Advanced Palliative Care. So much we can say about Keisha's background as well as all of our panelists, but we're just so delighted for all the wonderful wisdom and expertise that they offer. So welcome, Keisha. Thank you for being a part of this discussion tonight.
Thank you, and hello, my royal family.
All right. Wonderful. We're all family tonight, and we're so grateful for those who are sharing in this space. And so, Dr. Benitez, we will open the discussion and ask you to share some thoughts about your work, your role, and what you're seeing. Certainly, there's a lot you can share. So perhaps you can begin by telling us about your work and insights about what we should know about the brain as it ages.
Sure, I'm delighted to. Hello again, everyone. It's a pleasure joining you to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is caring for our older adults to make sure that they thrive as they age and that they age in place and enjoy this special time in one's life with the rest of their family. Just a little bit about me outside of who I am professionally. I grew up in the Philippines. I'm Filipino. I grew up in a very multi-generational household. My job in high school and college was driving my mom and my grandmother to their various appointments. My mom, just because she didn't like to drive, but my grandmother to bingo, to PT, to play mahjong with her friends, and it was just a part of life. And so it was a natural fit for me to progress in my career as a clinical neuropsychologist, which is the kind of doctor that studies the brain and how different things that happen to the brain translate to changes in behavior. And I really wanted to make the most impact with older adults. And so I wear two hats. One hat is as a clinician. So I'm the kind of doctor that, let's say, your primary care provider would refer you to if we needed to take a closer look at your memory or thinking, or if you had some concerns about your parents' memory and thinking and you needed a closer look. That's the kind of evaluation that I do to determine whether it's just normal aging or if it's the earliest signs of a disease or if it's a progressed disease and what might be causing it and also what to do about it. And it's that clinical work that's really informed the research that I do. So I do brain imaging research to help better understand what changes in the brain are happening just because of normal aging versus when it's not becoming normal anymore and what to do about it. But I also study things like non-invasive brain stimulation techniques to help people who are suffering from memory problems related to Alzheimer's disease and how we might improve their memory and thinking as well as their quality of life. And I've had the privilege to do this work alongside other really amazing clinicians and scientists at MUSC. And I'm looking at Dr. Robinson here, who I consider a good friend and certainly an inspiration in many ways for the ideas that we pursue in my lab. And I'm sorry, Keisha, that we haven't met, but I feel like I could pick your brain a lot over the many different things that you have expertise in also, because I think one thing we'll realize in just this conversation tonight is that it really takes a village, not just a village in your community or your family, but also all throughout the healthcare system, and including our allies in the legal field also, because there are so many practical things that we have to be thinking about that's way beyond just a medical diagnosis or a treatment that one has to give. So kudos to your group for putting together such an important forum. I think, I really look forward to learning a lot from you all myself.
Well, thank you so much. And your comments to lead us off in our discussion tonight reminded me how much I was blessed to grow up right next door to my grandparents, and just to be a part of the experience of gleaning from their wisdom. It is a blessing to be able to share in a multi-generational setting. So thank you. Thank you for leading us off and reminding us that it does take many areas of expertise to care for each other. So with those thoughts leading us off, Dr. Robinson, I welcome you into the discussion and just to share from your perspective and maybe talk to us about, you in the introduction, we were reminded that you specialize in looking at how diet, obesity, diabetes, how those can play a role. And certainly those aspects we're very aware and concerned about in our community and how that impacts brain function. So however you would like to share with us.
Good afternoon. So I'll start off a little bit about myself as well. So I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama. And much like Anya, I grew up with my grandmother in the house who was a diabetic who loved sweets, and where she would hide them. And she also had dementia, and she suffered also from many strokes. And so what my research now is based on was inspired by her journey and being part of her caretaking growing up, where I look at all three of those disorders. So looking at how having diabetes or obesity ultimately impacts the brain and is a increased risk factor for developing dementia and also having a stroke, and how that impacts recovery from stroke. So my research is really focused on understanding the mechanism so that we can develop treatments that can ultimately make it hopefully to clinic eventually. So I'm removed from patients. I don't work directly with patients, but I am focused on trying to, develop treatments to actually help. The one aspect of things that I work on and that I go out into the community, try to promote, is healthy eating, which none of us like to do because South Carolina has really great food. And it's usually not, the food that you should be eating every single day when you go out to restaurants. I think about my grandmother growing up. Even if you gave her, vegetables, a pot of collard greens, it had to have some pork fat in there or it wasn't good. So just, thinking about ways that we can alter our lifestyle that can ultimately benefit our health. And so the things that I work on in lab is just seeing, how does high fat diet affect memory? And also if you were to make, subtle changes to your diet, ultimately does it improve your memory? And so we see that in the laboratory. And so I really go out and try to promote, although it's very hard to convince seniors that they should cut back on sugar or carbohydrates. They don't like for you to mess with their food. But just thinking of ways that we could partner together to try to, just bring healthier lifestyles. I also would like, I don't know if I can take this time to also promote the Senior Expo that is coming up on March 13th, so pretty soon. It will be from 9 to 1 in the Charleston Area Convention Center. And this is an opportunity for seniors as well as caretakers or caregivers to all come out and find information. I have a dad who's 92 years old. And sometimes it's just really hard to find the information you need to get them the resources that they need to age in place. So this is an opportunity where we'll have vendors from all over, from healthcare to promoting wellness, legal advice, whatever you feel that you may need. There should be someone there to kind of discuss those things with you. So it's an opportunity to get information. If you need vaccinations, that will also be there. So I encourage you all to come out. There will be shuttles from the parking lot. So if you don't like to walk, we have a solution for that as well.
I am struggling to get off mute here, but thank you for sharing that information. And I think many of us have heard some of the advertisements. I know I have over the radio and seen some of the billboards. So thank you for reminding us about that opportunity with the Senior Expo coming up. And I know there's going to be a lot of great resources and opportunities for those who would like to participate in that event. So thank you. Thank you for, I'm sure there's a lot of work that you and your team offers behind the scenes to make that happen. So thank you for sharing that. There may be some comments or questions from our attendees later on about the Senior Expo, and they can certainly offer that. Before we move further, for both our doctors and our researchers on the line here, we've heard so much. Perhaps at least I've noticed. Maybe as I try to maintain a sleep regimen, I'm wondering from your perspective as researchers, clinicians, what you would say to us about the importance of rest, sleep. What does that look like in terms of healthy brain function?
So I can chime in first. Sleep is very important, but I will say as you age, your body goes through fluctuations where your sleep pattern changes. It may not be as easy for you to go to sleep. So you may have to begin to be more resourceful or figure out, what works best for you. But sleep is good for your brain health all the way around, and definitely for memory. So try to get your sleep if you can. I know a lot of people have to disconnect from, whether you sleep with the TV on or you're on a device, but trying to think of ways to kind of get your brain in a mode where it'll be easy for you to fall into sleep. And Anya may have something a little bit more clinical to say.
Oh, I just say ditto to everything that you said, but also to remind everyone that sleep, just like everything that we do while we're awake, is also a behavior. And a behavior can be learned and it can be shaped. And it's something that is an important behavior because the brain is actually quite active when we're asleep. It's restoring a lot of the things that, are challenging during the day. It helps us consolidate our memories. And what are we if we're not a collection of all of our memories, right? And so it's important to, let the brain do its restoration and rejuvenation work while we're asleep. And on that note, also, we're starting to learn a little bit more about how sleep is so very important to the development of Alzheimer's disease. One thing that sleep does is that it clears out essentially the gunk that starts forming that is, essentially why we know someone has Alzheimer's disease. There are these proteins that break off and they gather together and they develop that gunk. And that whole process can be curtailed to some extent by sleep. And that's kind of an active area of research right now. And so there's some clinical trials that are trying to make people sleep better to see if it prevents that accumulation of that gunk, that amyloid gunk in the brain. But like I said, it's one thing to know that it's good for you, but it's another thing to do the behaviors that make sure that you really do benefit from sleep. And they could be very simple things like, step one in just kind of the hierarchy list of sleep hygiene is to save your bedroom for sleep. That's all you really do. Take the TV out, Take, anything that could keep you awake, leave your phone in the other room. And the more that you associate restfulness with your bed, the more likely you are to sleep soundly. And, it's such a simple behavior, but it actually can be very impactful. There are also other, reasons why someone might be sleeping. Anxiety is a big reason for it too. And so making sure that you're getting that addressed either through, your community, having support from your family or your church community or a mental health provider. All of those things can really help make sure that we get the sleep that we need.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing that information. I have a pattern of just journaling before I go to sleep. And you mentioned, about the worries and the stressors sometimes we can take to bed with us. I find that that's one practice, as well as my reflections and meditations before I go to bed. That has been so helpful. There may be some other things we can do to help us get that sleep that we need. So thank you. Thank you for offering that perspective. There may be some other questions that we'll be turning back and asking from our medical experts, but we'll transition a little bit and turn to the legal side of things and invite Attorney Brown to share from your perspective. And I know there are legal documents, some of the practical issues that might be helpful to maybe everyone, but our seniors in particular, and those who care for them. So, Attorney Brown, I would just invite you to share from your perspective about some of those important documents that we may need to look at getting in place.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not really going to I know there was the background from some of our other panelists that really kind of led them to their field. And I've got a more lengthy journey that is, I think, not really necessarily as relevant to today's panel. But what I've seen from the legal side of it is directly tied into what we've heard to do with the mental health, your cognitive health, actually is more the word I'm looking for, the difference in options as the cognitive health declines. And what I've seen, particularly since I've come to Charleston Pro Bono Legal Services, I don't know how I just muted myself, is that particularly with the, when we get into the lower income communities, I get a lot of clients coming in who maybe didn't think to have documents done ahead of time, because we tend to think most commonly of your will. That is, I think, the most common legal document that people think of. And a lot of times people think, well, I don't really have anything of value, so I don't need to worry about that. Or, well, I have 3 children. I love all my children equally. It's just going to go to them. I don't need to do anything. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. So the first thing that I see a lot of is your will is only what happens to your belongings, what you own after you pass away. And what becomes a lot of times a bigger issue is managing your affairs while you are still alive. If something happens, if you have that cognitive decline and you are no longer able to manage your own affairs. And the difference then becomes, did you sit down with an attorney and do those legal documents, those estate planning documents, while you still had the cognitive capacity to do that? Or has it reached a situation where things have been going on, things have been progressing, your loved ones, your children are seeing that you are needing some help managing things, but they don't have the legal right to do those things for you because the legal paperwork was not done. And so in a nutshell, you can go while you are still mentally alert, having all good days, not just the good days and the bad days. And you can sit down with an attorney and you can prepare power of attorney documents. And those two primary types of power of attorney documents that we have. We have your medical or healthcare power of attorney, and that is what's going to let you say ahead of time if you're going to want life support, if you're going to want tube feeding, if you're going to want to be an organ donor, things of that nature. And that's also going to let you name an agent to make other medical decisions for you or to carry out those choices. All of this, if something happens and you are not able to make and communicate those decisions on your own any longer. Now, if you don't have a medical power of attorney, then at that point, those decisions are going to tend to go to your next of kin. It could be your spouse, and that could be a really messy thing if you've been estranged for years but not legally divorced. If you do not have a living spouse, it's going to be your children. And that can get messy if there are multiple children, particularly if those children can't agree on what happens. So you can get your medical power of attorney to address those. Now, we also have durable power of attorney where you can name an agent to handle the rest of your affairs for you, your banking, your Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, retirement accounts, your real estate if you have any, your personal property like your vehicles, your insurance. And if you don't have a durable power of attorney, then there is not a next of kin that makes those decisions for you. At that point, if you can no longer make or communicate your own decisions, if you don't have the regular daily cognitive ability anymore, then a loved one is going to have to go to the probate court and ask the probate court to appoint them to be your guardian. And it's a longer process. It's a more time-consuming process. It tends to be an expensive process because at that point, when you give a power of attorney, you are choosing who you are giving that authority to step up and do what you would do, or to act on your behalf. When someone goes to the probate court and asks to be appointed your guardian, they are saying this person can no longer make decisions for themselves, and they are asking the probate court to take that power away and give it to someone else. So there are a lot of checks and balances. So that is something that I really wish I could get out to the community and just express the importance of, even if you don't have anything of financial value that you're thinking of, still reach out to an attorney, because it's not just about what's going to happen with what you own after you pass away. It's also what's going to happen with you while you are still living, and what sort of plans have been made for that potentiality.
Thank you so much, Attorney Brown, for sharing that important information. I know a lot of what I see as a chaplain. Sometimes there are situations where it would have been so helpful, would be so helpful, and sometimes is so helpful when those documents are in place, especially the medical power of attorney and the durable power of attorney. And thank you for explaining the difference between especially those two documents, because there's sometimes some question or confusion. Some people, I believe, think that a durable power of attorney covers more than it does, especially when it comes to that medical decision making. So helpful to help us understand, and maybe there will be questions later on in our chat function to get into some more specifics about those documents. But thank you for outlining that for us. And I know that our next panelist has a lot of experience, practical experience working with that healthcare power of attorney, along with other documents, other situations. And so, Keisha, we invite you to share from your perspective, over 20 years as a social worker and now working as a palliative social worker. So there's much that you see and can share with us from your vantage point. So we welcome you.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, everyone, and hello to all the panelists. I'm just like Audrey. I won't give a reason as to why and how I got into palliative care, but one thing I wanted to is just take the time out to inform people about what palliative care is, because I think a lot of times you hear caregiving, living your best life. Well, the concept of palliative care is to have you live that ultimate lifestyle, even if you have a serious or life-limiting illness. And I like to tell people that palliative care is not necessarily the same as hospice care. I do understand that a lot of people equate palliative and hospice care together, but you can be receiving palliative care while you're still getting chemotherapy, or while you're still having treatments or getting evaluated for other issues that may be going on medically. The goal of palliative care is about comfort and helping to manage symptoms. And so, oftentimes, with the team, there's a clinical social worker like myself that can help a little bit with some people just don't want another medication to have. And so we're able to do a little bit of talk therapy to get through some of the anxiety that people have from having a serious illness, as well as the physicians and nurse practitioners and complementary therapies that are sometimes offered. And so I think that's probably the most important thing that I like to preference about working in a palliative care um, arena. But you will have a serious illness or a life limiting illness. And I think a lot of times people feel like with the diagnosis, you may be giving up, but I always say the goal for us is to help you live the fullest life that you have been given. And then I know there's going to be a lot of questions about other resources that are available for caregivers. I don't want to take the most time, but I'll probably be able to answer some of those questions, because I know oftentimes caregiving is a family or friend or unpaid task. And I'm sure that a lot of people online have a lot of questions about, resources and what should I be doing. But I will say Attorney Brown has said a lot about doing that power of attorney, because I can't tell you how much I deal with people who come into the hospital and they're in crisis mode, or the individual is too sick at that time to complete paperwork. And like she said, if there's not a durable power of attorney, then taking a letter or something like that from the hospital to the bank will not help you. And so I can't preference enough how important having a durable power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney is.
Well, thank you, Keisha. And I'm sure we will circle back and take a deeper dive into some of those aspects, especially with the resources that are available to all of us, whether we are a senior citizen or caring for an aging family member. But I think that helps us transition a little bit and broaden our perspective and think about how can we help the family member who's caring for their loved one and maybe finding themselves in a new role. Everyone is adjusting, perhaps, trying to find solutions and trying to figure things out. Some may be in a situation where they're in between generations and caring for two sides of the aging spectrum there. So thinking about how we can help the family member, whether those are resources, whether that means helping them adjust emotionally, taking on a different role. So from everyone's perspective, maybe we can circle back and look at it as you care for those who sit in front of you or come to you for care. They're bringing their team with them. They're bringing their supporters. So what can we say to the family member or that loved one or that caregiver in addressing maybe some of the concerns that they would bring? So
I don't mind starting.
Oh, go ahead. All right.
Since I finished, I like to tell people the first thing you want to know is are there disease specific resources? So depending on what your loved one has been diagnosed with, If it's dementia, then you reach out to like the Alzheimer's Association. Or if they're earlier in their state where you're still doing workups and still trying to get to the bottom of a diagnosis, you want to seek out information that might be based on income or resources that are based on aging, or the age of the person. And you can look to places like Trident Area Agency on Aging. And you'll hear me talk about Trident Area Agency on Aging for a lot of reasons. They have information and referral specialists, because a lot of times people are like, I just need a social worker to come and help me with this. But unless you have other services in your home, you may not have a social worker unless you're hospitalized. And so I think they're a great resource for people who are in the community. But if you have home health services or hospice services or any other people that are coming to your home physically, always ask if that agency does have a social worker, because they'll have some resources too. But with those disease specific resources, there are a lot of foundations. And so if you're taking care of someone with cancer, the American Cancer Society may have resources. Or if you're taking care of someone with some type of renal disease, then the Kidney Association may have foundation monies. And I tell people all the time, a lot of cost is out of pocket when it comes to caregiving, and which is why people sort of go into that role being an unpaid caregiver. If they are a veteran, you definitely want to tap into the VA system. And I won't step on Katrina's toes because I'm sure she has a lot more resources. But depending on their service connection and when they served, you really want to talk to people at the VA to see if there are other additional resources through them. Most of the care, though, will be out of pocket, unless someone has Medicaid. Medicaid is the only insurance that will pay for like long-term care, and that is in a nursing home. And I often tell people, but when there is a Medicaid bed, we can never guarantee where that bed may be within the state of South Carolina. And there are not a lot of beds available. They are far and few in between. And so if your loved one is getting where it's too much for you to take care of them at home, also talking with places like the Area Agency on Aging, and community long-term care to see if they can supplement other aids in the home. Lastly, it is out of pocket where you're having to pay for caregivers. And I'm sure that, there is a plethora of people on this call right now who might have different resources, but it takes money to take care of a loved one. Um, if if you are taking care of someone that is under the age of 50, or I'm talking to the caregiver themselves, look into a long-term care insurance plan, because the older you are, the more it costs. And what long-term care insurance does is it will pay for a caregiver for you when you get older, or it could pay for a nursing home placement. But if you're already taking care of someone that's over 65, it's going to cost you way too much to even try to look into purchasing that plan.
Keisha, I just really have to point out a couple of questions in the Q&A that I
Yes.
think really are directly related to the things that you're talking about. Do you see the Q&A?
I try to keep it down so I don't get distracted.
Yeah, well, there was one question that was asking about, I'm curious to hear what you think about providing guidance on geriatric behavioral treatment facilities. For instance, in the case of a dementia patient being admitted or needing care when medications are not working and the patient is endangering themselves and others, because things like calling law enforcement and EMS is, as you can understand, really not effective. And so I think that person would like to hear perhaps your thoughts on that, and also explaining the pros and cons of a life estate as it relates to Medicaid eligibility, because I know you brought up eligibility.
Yeah, I will defer the last question to Audrey, if you don't mind, Audrey, about life estate planning. I can sort of answer it, but I know you're an attorney. The first question about geriatric behavioral treatment, I will tell you that is probably the most difficult placement because even if you brought someone to the emergency department, there is medications that emergency departments can give to calm someone down. I would say they might need to be reevaluated for medications. But what tends to happen is a person has to be out of restraints before they can go into any type of facility. And so that's where your catch-22 is, because if you bring them to the hospital, they might get these medications and be put in restraints. And so they have to be out of restraints for a certain limit of time. But there are a lot of facilities, if they feel like the patient will be a danger to the staff, we're starting to see that a lot where people are denying them for placement. They certainly need to be in a locked unit. And I think a lot of that will depend on whether or not they're ambulatory versus are they just a threat to themselves. But I would say seeking a neurologist for any opinion about medications is probably the best way to go.
And I don't know, Keisha, if how you feel about this, but I do understand the hesitation with calling 911, but I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the 988 for mental health. If it is a immediate concern
Behavioral.
that is behavior related, 988 is the best bet to go because they handle those type of calls.
Thank you so much. And Attorney Brown, perhaps you can address that other question that was lifted up about the pros and cons of life estate as it relates to Medicaid eligibility.
Yes, and my response is going to be fairly general as well. Anytime you're talking about Medicaid eligibility, that's going to fall into the area of elder planning, which does have it's a different field of law versus estate planning. So estate planning is, like I said, those powers of attorney, your wills, whereas elder planning is more of the planning for your long-term care, including eligibility for certain government benefits like Medicaid. So what I will say generally is that Medicaid is a needs and means-based program. So there are income guidelines, I believe, don't quote me on that, and there are definitely asset limitations to be eligible for Medicaid. And so among those assets, they do consider real estate, and there are certain exemptions for your primary residence. The most important thing to know is that Medicaid eligibility has a look back period. And this is another one where, since I don't practice it, I don't remember off the top of my head, around 5 to 7 years, but I cannot remember the exact number. But the bottom line is that when you have real estate, if you go and you're putting somebody else on that real estate, if they're not already on there and you are adding somebody else to the deed or giving the deed to somebody else or in some sort of way changing that deed, whether that is adding somebody to own it, there's several types of ways of owning property in real estate. We have tenants in common, which is that everyone that is on the deed kind of holds the property together in certain percentages. We have joint tenants with right of survivorship, which means everybody on the deed owns the property together. And whenever one person passes away, the other people just continue to hold it. So it is a way to avoid probate, to avoid the estate. And then when you're talking about a life estate, the life estate is the person with the life estate has ownership of the property for their lifetime. When they pass away, their ownership interest just severs, so it's not left to their heirs or anything like that. And then the other people are what are called the remainder men. the remainder men do have an interest in the property during the life tenant's lifetime. But any of these options, any way that you hold real estate, these are all ownership interests. A life estate, a remainderment interest, those are present day interests with monetary values to them. So anytime you're looking at changing how a deed is held, you are facing the prospect that this could be considered a change in your asset, could be subject to that Medicaid look back period. And it's something that should be very carefully discussed with an attorney that practices that elder planning before making any changes to a deed, not just for the Medicaid reason, but for various other reasons that there could be gift tax implications when you change how the title is held and put somebody else on the deed. There could be judgment issues if somebody that you add to the deed or give the property to, if they were to be in a car accident and there was a judgment against them, that could attach to the property. You are giving them an ownership interest of some sort. And once you put them on that deed with you, now you cannot do anything with that property without them signing off on it or a court order. You can't sell it. You can't take out a mortgage. You can't take out maybe a home equity line of credit for renovation. You may not be able to, if something happens with your roof or your windows, there may be some grants or government money out there to assist with that. But if there's other people on the property, that may affect the eligibility for that. We have in South Carolina owner-occupied real estate taxes. It reduces the property taxes on your property. That could become an issue if there's people on the property that are not living there, particularly if they own other property elsewhere that they are getting that lower tax rate on. So there's just so many implications and considerations. And I see this frequently. Clients that come in, they've got property, it's often been in the family for generations. They want to keep it in the family. They don't want it to go through probate. They want to, one way or another, put their children on the deed immediately. And it's just, there's just so many nuances and things that could go sideways with that.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that information. And I also wanted to bring up, there's a question in our Q&A chat, and perhaps Dr. Benitez and Dr. Robinson, you can address this one. Someone says that they agreed to study for research and it requires a PET scan. And from what they understand, they are not comfortable with the process. And they're wondering if PET scans are dangerous. So perhaps you can address that question.
I'm delighted to address that. It's an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, actually multiple issues. One is participating in research. Thank you so much to who posted that, for being interested in participating in research. Some studies can be challenging, but we can't begin to understand the impact of our science and the treatments that we develop unless we contribute to the research. And so, I think it's really wonderful. But that said, different research studies do different things, and there's different balances of risks and benefits to participating in a study. Different research studies are also doing different things. In this case, it's a brain imaging study. That's what the PET scan is about. And if it is indeed, well, actually, I'm just assuming that because of my bias. It could very well be another PET study for another organ or another part of the body. But let's just assume, because this is what I know, it might be a brain imaging study. PET scans are done for a very specific reason, to identify something very specific in the body, be it the brain or in the organ. And sometimes these scans are required because whatever intervention they might be doing for you in the research study is so very dependent on what they find on those scans. So for instance, in the Alzheimer's disease world, we now have these drugs that remove those, gunky plaques that I talked about earlier from the brain, those Alzheimer's plaques. But what they learned is that they don't want to put anybody on those drugs unless they have PET scans to prove that they do have that gunk in the brain. Otherwise, it poses a risk to patients that, that you don't want to happen. So it's like you're trying to remove this thing from a brain that wasn't even there. So that's one of the reasons for doing a PET scan. And it's a simple, well, it's a procedure where you come in, they inject a contrast agent in you, which then binds to whatever it is that they want to image in your brain. After about maybe an hour after you get that injection, you go into a scanner. So it's like you're laying on this bed and you get wheeled into the scanner. And some people really can't do it because they get claustrophobic and it's uncomfortable for them. For some scans, it's okay to take a drug to relax you, like a benzodiazepine, things like Xanax, for instance. And some studies don't allow that. But for some people who have to do imaging, be it with a PET scan or an MRI scan, it's not unusual to take medication that can help calm you down if claustrophobia or fear of tight spaces is not good for you. But just like with any research study, no one is forcing you to do this. If there is a procedure within a research study that makes you uncomfortable, it's on the part of the research team to explain the risks and benefits of it. PET scans, for instance, expose you to a little bit of radiation, but it's definitely safe. The contrast agent is, something in your body that otherwise wouldn't be there, but it's also deemed as safe. And whenever we decide to do any research with humans, we have to go through a pretty extensive review process to demonstrate to a committee called the IRB that all of the procedures that we're asking participants to do are safe and that we're mitigating risk as much as possible, and the benefits to not just the patient, but certainly to society outweigh those risks. So, different studies can involve uncomfortable procedures, but I would hope that whatever research team you're working with, they do take the time to walk through every single procedure and what your concerns are and answer every single question. And there is no silly or stupid question. All of these questions are very important for you to be able to weigh the pros and cons. But if you do ultimately decide to participate in research, then, that's really wonderful because it really helps us learn more about the conditions and make sure that the discoveries that we make are applicable to the greatest number of people.
Thank you so much. An important question that someone raises. And I'm wondering too, we live in such a mobile society. There may be some caregivers who don't live in the immediate vicinity of the family member, the ones that they are thinking about. And if you all have any insights as far as resources or just things to be aware of, if we're thinking about a family member and they may be some miles away, maybe in a different part of the state or out of state. So if you all can share from your perspectives, what are some of the things you would invite folks to consider if they're in that situation?
So I would suggest for someone that lives away and they're still trying to be a caregiver to their loved one, hiring a geriatric care manager. And a geriatric care manager is a professional that is able to come into the home or if they're at a facility and help your loved one with managing, getting to and from appointments, making sure that they're talking to physicians, ensuring that, medications have been taken. They can do a plethora of things. Again, they are hired service, and it's usually an out-of-pocket cost. But I think I've never heard anyone who has utilized a geriatric care manager not be happy and feeling like there's someone who is trying to manage the care of my loved one. Um, and they're given that up-to-date information. And I think oftentimes we can see with some seniors, when they live alone, they know how to overcompensate. And so questions over the phone and things like that don't always work. And so I tell people, as much as you can, try to FaceTime, try to see the environment, because it's a lot that can be said and unsaid over the phone. But sometimes that allows them to be able to participate. And I know telemedicine is becoming a real popular thing now. I know that there have been some physicians with the approval of the individual who is attending appointments for their loved one to join in on the meetings. And that's been very helpful too, so that they can, ask questions and do things like that. And I'll tell you, earlier before we were getting on, I was listening to different ones saying they had an Echo and Siri and things like that were giving them reminders. Also doing that for your loved one, even if they can call out, setting up an Echo, medication reminders, those kind of things are very helpful. Just to make sure that there's that just a little extra touch in the home to help people feel safe and secure. I don't know, others might have things too.
I can chime in a little bit, and this is just from my personal experience because my dad is 92 and he lives in Alabama. So the resources that we have here in South Carolina is one thing, but it's state dependent. So literally, if you Google whatever state it is and just say resources for seniors, usually you'll find the agency that provides a list of all the resources that you may need. And so I was able to do that for Alabama specifically, and it takes me right to the site. South Carolina Department on Aging is another resource that just gives you a list of different resources that you can access. So just trying to find the state department related to aging or seniors will be helpful.
And you heard me say I will give Trident Area Agency on Aging a tag, but every state has an area agency on aging, and they really are your go-to. And I will say some people are very new to caregiving. So the South Carolina Respite Coalition actually provides online training curriculum for people who are new to caregiving. I think sometimes I will say this in the most non-threatening way. We have had some times where people have come into the hospital and we had to get adult protective services involved. And it wasn't for lack of care, and it was just they didn't know how to properly care for their loved one. And so I think now there's been a lot, even through Medicare, about having conversations about caregiving to caregivers. And so we want to make sure that people have knowledge so that they know, the things that they are doing correctly, and we want to celebrate that. But sometimes I think some people will like, well, mom never wants me to touch her because of an illness, and so they end up with a lot of bed sores. And so there are teachable moments that can come into play with caregiving.
I just have maybe a slightly different thing to add that perhaps some people on the call might find relatable. So you would think my mother, who is 8,000 miles away, but she may as well be up the road. You would think that if she had a daughter who was a dementia doctor, that she would, have it all figured out, right? But the reality is that for a lot of our families, you've got that dynamic, right? I will always be her daughter. In many cases, I haven't progressed beyond the age of 4, and she'll always be my mom. And, there is a choice there that I made at one point to, think about whether I think my mom should be doing what I think she should be doing, or whether she's doing what she chooses to do because of who she is and what she wants and what she prioritizes in life, which could be very different from mine. And so I think that's just maybe a little share to always think about, kind of that serenity prayer, thinking about what to accept, knowing what you can change, having the wisdom to know the difference, because we all care about our family members, but we also have to respect some of the decisions that they make for themselves that perhaps we might not understand, and be able to work together in order to make sure that at least, safety is taken care of. There is a trust, there is access to resources. But personally, and I think I've also seen it certainly in, my friends, family, and also my patients, there's a lot of grace that needs to be extended to oneself and to other people as we navigate this, challenging transition that really is not easy for anybody. I've yet to encounter anyone in my personal or professional life who thinks that this transition from being, a self-sufficient adult to someone who needs help is an easy one.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm wondering, as we get close to our time, I'm wondering if we have an opportunity to circle around and if there are any takeaways, anything you would want our audience to know as they care for themselves or as they care for their loved ones. What are some of the key things you would want us to remember from our conversation tonight? So, Attorney Brown, can I invite you to begin our talk in that way and just remind us of some of those important things we can have in place to make sure everyone gets the resources that they need?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a end of life planning standpoint, or even just a future planning standpoint, at least having a sit down with an attorney to discuss the medical power of attorney documents, the durable power of attorney documents, a last will and testament, to determine how those could be beneficial to you, and to make informed decisions to set yourself and your loved ones up as you all go through the aging process. And from a financial standpoint, obviously for Charleston Pro Bono Legal Services, we provide our services at no cost to low-income residents of Charleston County, so they could always submit an application through our website. And then for other organizations, there are various other pro bono and sliding scale organizations in the communities. And then also the South Carolina Bar Lawyer Referral Service. The attorneys that have signed up through that, they are private attorneys, they're not pro bono, but they have agreed not to charge more than $50 for the first 30 minutes of a consultation. So that can be a cost-effective way for a person to sit down, get more specific information, and make those informed decisions for their planning for their future.
Thank you so much. Keisha, would you have any words to share, closing thoughts, takeaways?
I like to support independence for your loved one. I think sometimes when we become caregivers of someone that we love, we want to do all things. Just remember, allowing the things that people are still able to do is very important to them. And so even with any of the resources available, I always say allowing them to have just the amount of independence that they can have. And I know sometimes it makes people fearful that they're going to make a wrong decision, but it goes back to what you were saying earlier about, give people grace and give yourself some grace. And as caregivers, you're to be commendable, because sometimes people take on the role because there was no one else. And then some people I know are very happy to have been able to become a caregiver. And no matter which role you've taken, please make sure that you are in tune to your own self-care. Never stop going to your own doctor's appointments, and think about a plan, because I think sometimes, and I've seen it more than I like to say, the caregiver burnout is real. And I've worked in hospice for several years, and I would have the caregiver to die before my patient.
Wow. I love that word, grace. I think that's been mentioned quite a few times, whether we extend that grace to others or we extend it to ourselves, and not to forget about caring for self. And I'm so grateful that we have a resource literally across the street from where I work, dedicated folks in the Center for Healthy Aging. And maybe there are some in our community who aren't aware of the work that goes on, or that resource, some of the things that make that work possible, including the wonderful people who work there. So I'm wondering, Dr. Robertson, Dr. Benitez, if you all could share, just to give a plug for that agency, the Center for Healthy Aging, and what goes on.
Yeah, so the Center for Healthy Aging, essentially we have different arms to it, but it's to handle from the research side of things to the clinical side, to just outreach and community support. So one of the larger community activities that we do is this Senior Expo. And because Keisha mentioned the Trident Area Agency on Aging, they're also partnering with us as a part of this. So all of the resources that you think if you still have a lot of questions, you're just not sure where to go, or what to do, I really suggest that you come out. You'll see me there. I'll be there. If you don't know who to go to, I'll try to help pinpoint you in the right direction. If you're having financial difficulties, there will be people there to help with that. Just whatever we can do to kind of help seniors get along, and be able to age in place, and really help caregivers to be able to do that. I just want to echo what Keisha said again, about self-care as a caretaker, because it takes a lot out of you. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with, your loved one that you are taking care of. Because it's not easy. It's tough. So make sure you take care of yourself, and kudos to you for taking that journey.
Well, wonderful. I think my takeaway from this conversation will be around communication, preparation, and grace. So those are my takeaways, and so thank you to each one of you for what you are doing in our community, and for certainly being a part of our conversation tonight. So we're grateful for our panelists, and grateful for the attendees for sharing. This conversation will live on our platforms with the Royal Foundation. And so we just are so grateful for those experts in our community that we can reach out to, and who give the time and give their gifts. So thank you again. We'll invite anyone who would like to share in this moment to pause as we close our time in prayer. We are grateful for the gifts and the service of others. We are thankful for this evening's discussion, and we thank you for the work that goes on. We thank you, Lord, for the love that exists between family and generations. And ultimately, that love exists from generation to generation because of a God who's over all. So we thank you for this day. We thank you for life. We thank you for love, as we continue to serve and love each other. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you.